Dragon Ball is one of the most beloved anime franchises on the planet. But despite that, it has its fair share of content that's inappropriate for kids, especially in this day and age. From violence on children, creepy old man interests, and visually disturbing moments, Dragon Ball is pretty intense at times.
Well, let's begin.
Before we get started, be sure to click on that subscribe button and tick that little bell to get all the latest content from Screen Rant every day.
This country now belongs to my empire!
Hitler is in the show. Dragon Ball Z has no shortage of awesome villains to pull from. Whether it's Vegeta, Cell, or Boo, each villain has tested the might of Goku and the Z Fighters and brought the stakes up each and every time. Many of these villains are all powerful and can cause a lot of death and destruction with the flick of a finger, making them terrifying long before we take their designs into account. All that in mind, we have to wonder what the franchise creator, Akira Toriyama, was thinking when he put Hitler into Dragon Ball.
I am to be your new leader!
There have been a few nods to real-world characters in films and Dragon Ball in the past, including some references to Arnold Schwarzenegger, but the inclusion of Hitler in the movie Dragon Ball Z Fusion Reborn is baffling. While never explicitly referred to as Hitler, the dictator is clear representation of the Führer. He comes drawn with a signature mustache that Hitler sported and even does a Nazi salute while riding his tanks. Maybe Toriyama was acknowledging that Hitler ranks up there with Cell and Frieza, but it's a controversial move, putting the biggest villain in real-world history in a cartoon aimed at kids.
Get away from that guy!
Recoome vs. Gohan. Dragon Ball Z is no stranger to violence. Most of the characters are some of the best fighters on the planet, and when they're not competing in martial arts tournaments, they're usually defending the Earth or another planet from certain doom. When this happens, wanton destruction usually occurs between all the fighting. While most of the fighting takes place between adults, it's not a rule for the show. Goku has two children, Goten and Gohan, and both of them are more than ready to take on their own battles when they're allowed.
Goten! I know, I'm ready.
But like their dad, they need training, and lots of it. Before anyone even engages with the big baddie Frieza, he summons his elite squad known as the Ginyu Force to Namek. Believing to be up to the challenge, Gohan finds himself in a battle with Recoome. It doesn't go over well. Seriously undermatched, Gohan gets incredibly abused in the one-sided fight, which culminates in Recoome breaking Gohan's neck, leaving the boy bloodied and paralyzed on the ground. It's kind of shocking to see that level of violence be dished out against a child, even in an animated series like Dragon Ball Z. The worst bit is that Recoome seems to be enjoying it, making the fight that much more disturbing to watch.
Enough of this. You are mine now.
The start of the Cell Saga. After the Android Saga concluded, fans got their first look at the latest villain to grace the Dragon Ball franchise. It was, of course, Cell, who would go on to transform himself through his saga, going from imperfect to perfect versions of himself. When he started off, though, he was pretty much a parasite who lusted for more powerful versions of himself. Being a villain, he naturally undertook that mission for himself. Unlike the Z Fighters or Frieza, who relied on power and training to get stronger, well, Frieza until later in Super, Cell didn't need to do such things. To make himself stronger, he had to suck the energy out of regular people and the androids. To do this, he would stab his tail into the body of a human and drain their innards out.
There's no escape this time!
By the time he was done, there was nothing left of the person but deflated skin and clothes. It's something out of a horror movie, with the act and end result leaving a nasty impression in the minds of youngsters who got to watch the scene. Most of the violence in Dragon Ball is combat-based, but to see this parasitical act of murder and then see the end result is pretty much the stuff of nightmares.
Now meet our next contestant!
Killa. When it comes to the cast of Dragon Ball, it's safe to say that they're pretty much all on the pale side of the color spectrum. But then a character like Killa has to come along and actually make matters worse, despite being a character of color. Introduced in the World Martial Arts Tournament, or the Tenkaichi Budokai, Killa looks like he was taken straight out of a 1970s blaxploitation picture and sounds even worse than that.
Yeah.
We're not sure what the animators were thinking with this one. The weird lip design is hard to ignore, especially today. Also, having his name be Killa instead of Killer? Did they really have to do that? The worst offense comes from his voice, which may actually need redubbing or subtitles. It's a poor imitation of a mock Mr. T accent, and comes along as pretty racist. What's worse is that Killa had plenty of important dialogue sequences, making it hard to keep up with what he was saying under all that mumbling. When kids see this character today, they'll know something's not right with how he's being represented. When parents discover there's a pretty racist interpretation of an African-American fighter on the show, it may upset more than a few.
It's my honor to serve justice!
Piccolo's attack on Goku. This moment actually takes place at the very end of Dragon Ball, the very first series in the Dragon Ball franchise. In it, Piccolo, who's Goku's longtime ally in Dragon Ball Z, is actually the main antagonist of that show. He's the reincarnation of the Demon King Piccolo, so you know there's a bad bone or two in his body. Goku finds himself fighting Piccolo in the final round of the World Martial Arts Tournament. The two opponents go at it for some time, and near the end, Goku believes himself to be the victor, thus letting his guard down. It's here where Piccolo attacks Goku with a beam from his mouth. What follows is utter brutality. The blast left Goku with a large, bloody hole in his chest. This puts Goku in extreme agony on the ground, flailing about. Piccolo proceeds to kick the downed Goku repeatedly on his wound. Talk about vicious and a grudge. Not only is it visually graphic, but having the villain repeatedly kick his downed opponent in a controlled environment might actually scare kids more than a fight that's all about defending the Earth. Piccolo doesn't end there, though. He barrages the wound with elbow attacks and even energy attacks. It becomes more like torture than it does combat. Where's the ref?
He will provide us with ample energy.
Yamcha's encounter with Android 20. When future Trunks enters the plot, he informs Goku that a group of androids from the future will be arriving in exactly 3 years who will destroy everything in their path. This gives the Z-Fighters 3 years to train to get ready for their new conflict. But one thing they didn't take into account was that the androids didn't give off an energy reading like organic beings, rendering them invisible to our heroes until it's too late. Mistaking Yamcha for Goku, androids 19 and 20 casually sneak up behind him. Admittedly, Yamcha could have been more on his guard in this scene. He knows to look out for danger, and the androids clearly aren't acting like the rest of the civilians. It was never going to end well for Yamcha, who nearly dies moments later. But he doesn't get attacked by an energy beam, or punched to a pulp like other scenes in the anime. Android 20 holds Yamcha and drains his energy down. Then, in front of his friends, he rams his hand right through Yamcha's chest. This could have been done off camera, or off celluloid, but the animators wanted to show how cold these androids could be, and showed us the act in full. For an animated series with a younger target audience in mind, it's a grueling and pretty messed up scene to watch.
I say we torch the whole barrel of monkeys.
Casual genocide. One thing that makes Dragon Ball villains so terrifying is not only their lust for power, but how lax they are about all the violence they inflict. It's one thing to go after a group of fighters and engage in a small-scale battle across some plane, but some of the villains in Dragon Ball Z are so cold-blooded, they take things to the next level. For example, when Frieza wipes out the planet Vegeta, there's no moment of reflection, no minute pondering on whether it's a good idea or not. The act of destroying an entire planet, and thus by association killing billions of, well, sort of innocent lives, is something that actively makes many of these villains happy. And is the equivalent to stepping on an ant. That psychotic behavior is ultimately what makes them equally disturbing as they are powerful. When Frieza loses again in Super, he decides to blow up the Earth in a final act of destruction. Thankfully, that attack wasn't permanent thanks to the time-altering powers of Whis. See so much needless death and have the villain be so happy about it is definitely something that might throw an adult off a bit, never mind a child.
He's on the move.
Everything Boo does. Dragon Ball Z went out with a bang, literally. As each villain had to up the stakes to make it more interesting, Z's final saga went all out and gave us Boo. Given to us in 3 stages, he got progressively stronger and more evil as the lengthy arc went on. His final form, Kid Boo, is the strongest of them all, despite his smaller stature. But it's not just his strength that's scary, it's how he uses it. Boo was in the middle of fighting both Goku and Vegeta and decided to, you know what, let's just blow up this entire planet. His psychotic split decision-making means he has no remorse about anything he does. As the saga progressed, his open acts of violence increased, right until the planet itself was a target. Kid Boo actually did what most Dragon Ball villains failed to do, and that's blow up the entire planet. Billions of lives gone. Like Frieza, his casual genocide is frightening. What makes this one scarier is that Goku and Vegeta were present and failed to stop him, something fans have come to expect. It's gut-wrenching to see the heroes fail after so many years and show that the villain can win.
Don't worry, it won't hurt too bad.
Frieza's scene with Krillin. This is perhaps one of the most violent and disturbing moments in the entire franchise, and that's saying something. Just saying. After Nappa killed Piccolo in the Saiyan saga, and with no way to wish their friends back with a now-defunct dragon, the heroes had to make their way to the planet Namek to use the Namekian Dragon Balls to wish them back. It's a long story. But on Namek, they find the evil Titan, Frieza.
I'll write the name of Frieza in lights across the galaxy.
It's here that bad things start happening, especially to, well, Krillin. Even if you're a casual fan of Dragon Ball, or maybe even not a fan at all, there's a good chance you're familiar with the fact that Krillin dies a lot in the series. It was something of a joke for a while, but there's nothing about this scene that's funny. Using one of his horns, Frieza actually impaled Krillin. It's a pretty bloody and violent scene as the animators showed the attack and the bloody impalement in close-up. The horn slowly piercing Krillin's body is pretty uncomfortable to watch, even for an animation. The impalement seems to go on forever, and it's definitely one of the most R-rated moments in the franchise's history. This scene was heavily modified in the Kai re-release for obvious reasons, as that scene is honestly enough to traumatize most adults, never mind kids. But that impalement didn't actually take Krillin out, because he was healed by the tiny Namek Dende. However, Krillin died by Frieza's hand later on in the saga, which explains why he was so terrified at seeing the villain again in Dragon Ball Super. We can understand that.
So, I don't suppose any of those prizes are dirty movies?
No!
Master Roshi's creepy obsession. Unlike most entries on this list, our top pick has nothing to do with violence. The greatest human martial artist on the planet Earth, Roshi trained Goku as a young child in the first Dragon Ball arcs and taught him his trademark move, the Kamehameha. He may look like a frail old man, but Roshi could still pack a punch. The idea of a wise old mentor harkens back to all sorts of ancient lore, and having such a mentor seems like a positive role model for kids to look up to.
Good job. You're halfway there.
But Roshi doesn't set the best examples when it comes to his views on women, especially today. Roshi is quite openly a pretty big pervert and frequently gets too excited when he sees a young girl, whether in real life or in a magazine that he reads. He'll often yell at people who try to interrupt his fantasies and blatantly gets a little too close to some of the female characters. He even gets nosebleeds when he's too excited. Sure, he more often than not gets criticized or attacked for his moments, but there's no doubt that Roshi is definitely a little creepy and not something that kids should look up to. What's worse is that Kai is right there with him, making both old wise men creeps.
Have you no decency? We're a very impressionable kid here.
Well, that's it for today. Which Dragon Ball moment do you think is the most inappropriate for kids? Do you think it's the violence or the creepy stuff that's the worst offender? Do you think it's okay for kids to watch the older Dragon Ball episodes? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for videos like this in your playlist every day. Thanks for watching.